Hey everybody, Jay the Fish Guy here. Today's episode of Viewer Questions, we're going to be talking about cyanobacteria or red slime algae. Now, this particular nuisance algae has been the bane of many hobbyists over the years, and hopefully today's video can, highlight some of the ways to combat it, as well as some of the ways to just simply prevent it in general. Now, as the full name suggests, cyanobacteria, it is not technically an algae. Even though it shares a lot of characteristics of algae, it is a type of bacteria and is a little trickier to deal with sometimes. You'll see people fighting cyanobacteria blooms, and doing all sorts of things to try to fix it, and just nothing seems to work. Well, on the plus side, the main reasons for getting cyanobacteria to begin with are generally the same as why you get any other strain of nuisance algae that just starts to take over your tank. Why some tanks seem to favor hair algae versus cyano, I'm not really sure on that. Whether it's a particular nutrient, specific water parameters, that make one algae seem to be out-competing the others. Hard to say for sure. I'm not a chemist. I haven't done in-depth research. I just know how to keep from getting it to begin with and take care of it once you have it. So anyway, the main way to deal with cyanobacteria is obviously to not have it to begin with, right? If we can prevent the cyanobacteria from developing in the first place, that's generally, I would consider, to be the best way to not deal with it at all. So why does cyano develop in your tank? Well, like I said, like a lot of other algae, or any nuisance algae, it all generally boils down to nutrient levels in your tank, whether it's waste, food, detritus stuck in the rockwork or the sand bed. That is going to be the main cause of these nuisance algae outbreaks, and again, specifically cyano we're talking about in this video. So what'll happen is generally it's in a specific area in the tank. A lot of times you'll see it start either in a corner on a particular rock. It doesn't generally just develop in the entire tank all at once. So why is that? Well, usually that's an area where these nutrients or waste or detritus tend to be the most concentrated. Now, whether that's not necessarily a dead spot, but an area in your tank where everything kind of just collects due to the flow of the water, food and waste just kind of settle in one corner or on a particular rock, that's usually where you start ending up seeing it first. From there, it can just continue to take over and spread and go throughout the entire tank. So preventing that to begin with, good husbandry, good maintenance. If you guys have seen any of my other videos, I know I harp on this a lot, but honestly, it's the best way to go about preventing all of these issues before they even develop. Making sure that you're maintaining your filtration, making sure you're gravel vacuuming the sand bed areas that you can reach. You don't necessarily have to move rocks or deal with things like that, but getting out the detritus, the waste, before it breaks down, before it starts impacting water quality, and literally getting into these good habits excuse me, from day one, as opposed to being on autopilot for 6 months, and then all of a sudden you start noticing these algae develop, and again, cyano, and going, oh wow, something's wrong. Let's try to figure out what we need to do. I don't like being reactive to problems in a reef tank. I like to prevent them from the get-go and just not have to deal with them at all. So proper water changes, proper water chemistry, again, making sure you're getting the detritus out of the tank, and setting up your rock work from the beginning to prevent areas of detritus from collecting, from starting. So that's probably the best way to prevent it, is stay ahead of your nutrients in the tank. And if you do that, typically you won't have any algae to speak of, let alone cyano problems. Okay, so you didn't do that from the get-go. Odds are, if you're finding this video, you're already dealing with a cyano problem, and now you're wondering how best to take care of it. There are products on the market that, like red slime remover is a classic one. I don't like using chemical fixes for the red slime algae, and that's because it's fixing the symptom, it's not fixing the problem, if that makes sense. So you're treating the tank with red slime remover, you're killing the red slime, but why did it develop in the first place? You're not addressing that, you know what I mean? So it's a good quick fix or a first step to get rid of if you have a lot of cyano, but don't assume that by treating with red slime remover, my job is done here, I don't have to do anything else, the tank's now going to be fine, because that's not how it works. So that, again, if you have a larger tank or a larger cyano problem, the red slime remover, again, is a good first step. But if it's a small patch of cyano, catch it before it's a problem. You can take your gravel vacuum, take off the gravel vacuum portion of it, the larger diameter tube, and just with the smaller diameter vinyl tube, just go ahead in the tank and vacuum out the area. If it's in the sand bed and you suck up a little bit of sand, that's not a problem. If it's on the rock work, you may have to kind of work in conjunction with a small brush to try to lift it out of the rock as you're siphoning. Usually that helps to have an extra set of hands, so one person can man the end of the hose and the bucket, and you can man the hose and the scrub brush and work with both hands freely, not having to worry about your bucket overflowing. So, you know, removing as much as you can from the get-go is a great place to start as well. Now, beyond that, it really depends on how old the tank is, how neglected the tank has been. My personal belief with some of these older tanks, and I know some people don't like the term, but the whole old tank syndrome, basically it's been neglected. It should be more neglected tank syndrome. But the tanks that have been neglected and these nutrient levels have been allowed to develop over time and get to a point where it's actually saturating into the sand bed and into the rock work, these are the tanks that are a lot more problematic. And you can do massive water changes, even as much as say like 75–80%, to fix a water quality issue. The next day you test it, oh, it doesn't look too bad. But as time goes on over the course of, let's say, a week, the nutrient levels in the water, okay, so here's the water and here's your rock and sand. You fix the nutrient levels in the water, okay? So when you do your tests, everything looks like it should be fine. As time progresses, it wants to balance back out again. So it's actually pulling nutrients out of the sand and out of the rock, and then all of a sudden your water quality has gone back to crap again in the matter of a week or two. So at that point where the tank has been neglected for that long and it's again super saturated into the system itself, you're going to have to do massive water changes almost weekly to start progressing and getting ahead of that. This should also be coupled with taking all the rock out, thoroughly gravel vacuuming all the sand, or even potentially changing the sand bed would probably be a quicker and less expensive option, because as we know, water changes can get expensive on bigger systems if you have to do a lot of large volume changes. So if you can just get rid of the sand that has the nutrients absorbed into it, you're better off. You still have the rock, and I don't necessarily suggest getting rid of the rock, but you have to be aware that if you're at that point, nutrient levels are that bad, it's going to take some work to come back from it. So again, your best bet is to not get yourself into that situation from the get-go. You know, being aware of these things early on as opposed to waiting until you have a problem. If it's a small outbreak and nutrient levels aren't too bad, water changes. That's going to be your best bet. Siphon off the offending cyano every time you do a water change, and just really hit it. You know, 50% water changes aren't really all that bad. I know for folks with larger tanks it can be a concern, but you know, the water changes really are the critical piece of this puzzle, no matter, again, whether you're doing cyano or other types of nuisance algae. Getting rid of what's causing the algae by flushing it out, you know, getting rid of the old water, putting in new water, that is going to help tremendously, and far, far better than throwing gadgets or chemicals or, oh, I need a bigger skimmer. You may, but, and again, I've said in other videos, you know, tech isn't the answer. Good husbandry can fix any problem that you have, and specifically to the point, water changes. So by doing larger volume, more frequent water changes when you have an issue, that's going to get rid of the bad, it's going to put back in the good, and you will make ground. You know, again, siphon off as much of the algae as you can. You know, scrub with a soft bristle brush. I tend to go to Lowe's or Home Depot in the cleaning supply section, and a lot of times I can find a soft bristle brush that has pretty good sized bristles on it, and it's got a handle, and you know, you can really scrub up your rock pretty good and get kind of down in the nooks and the crannies. If the rock, you know, if you're moving rocks around and a lot of detritus is coming out of it, if there's no corals on the rock, or if you can remove them easy enough, taking that rock out and kind of in a bucket of water from the tank or fresh mixed salt water, and really like bounce it around, try to get all the stuff off of it, and then put it back in, that will help out as well. Because again, all this detritus is like localized fertilizer. Your water tests may test out fine. You know, you may read 0 on nitrates, 0 on phosphates, but God, I still have algae issues. Well, that's because the nutrients that are absorbed in the sand and in the rock is just locally feeding these algae. So you can rack your brain going, God, why, my water's good, why do I have algae? Well, the water's good, but you still have a nutrient issue in the tank. So hopefully this shines a little bit of light on the whole cyanobacteria. You know, it kind of covers, again, all algae, not just cyano, but it's really a simple fix for the most part. You know, don't feel that you need bigger, badder, this, that, or the other as far as equipment. You know, having the proper equipment in place is a good idea, but is not going to be the end all. Water changes and getting the nutrients out of the system, that's what's going to help you out the most. So, thanks a lot for watching, guys, and we'll catch you on the next one.